lot of long-running game series have a NES-era title that the oldest or most hardcore fans still revere most, and then a SNES game that's the old-school favorite among slightly younger fans or those who got into the franchise a lot later and prefer 2D games. For Dragon Quest, that SNES classic is Dragon Quest V. Developed once again by Chunsoft, Japanese players revere this 1992 entry almost as much as DQ3, but unlike that game, Dragon Quest V didn't see a Western release until far later, in 2009 when a localization of the DS remake reached our shores. More recently, we got a mobile port of that version, which is the one I went with. As of 2024, it's the most accessible way to play, and since you can't do much better as far as mobile ports go, I'd recommend it if you're as unwilling as I was to pay the insane price for a DS copy. Not surprisingly, 5 plays the same as the first 4 games, traditional JRPG goodness. RPG fans either rag on Dragon Quest for this, or it's what they love most about the series, and I fall into the latter camp. I know what to expect with DQ's core gameplay, structure, and even visuals. I like all that, and DQ5 offers more of it. I do wish I'd played the Super Famicom version to compare with, as the graphics here are exactly the same as in the mobile remakes of 4 and 6. That disappoints me a little, since I enjoy seeing how far developers push games visually as they get more comfortable with a hardware generation and as consoles cycle through. Yet, when you play the most recent version of the first 6 Dragon Quest games today, they all look identical. This complaint only makes sense if you value viewing games through a historical perspective, but I do, which means I'll definitely check out the original at some point. It's on the SNES for crying out loud, a giant step up from the NES, and I haven't fully appreciated that aspect with my own eyes yet. On the other hand, plenty of visual touches nonetheless make their impact on mobile. Aside from series staples like castles, countrysides, deserts, and volcanoes, you now visit a welcome variety of settings, including a fairyland dream world real only to the player, as well as skeevier locales like a slave labor camp or pirate ship. Each location ties into the story, on which Chunsoft places a greater emphasis than ever. In fact, I'd call this the first JRPG with a story comparable to modern JRPG storytelling, which tends to focus on a single fleshed-out character, then adds other major characters, usually party members, as you go. You play as the son of a king named Pancras and follow your character, the hero, from birth all the way through adulthood, including marriage and having highly plot-relevant kids. And I mean literally from birth. You control Pancras himself in the short scene that opens the game, where you get to name his newborn son. The first third or so of the story follows the hero as a child, as Pancras has seemingly abandoned his throne, now living as a salty sea dog, teaching the ropes of adventuring to his son. After tragedy befalls poor Pancras, we follow the hero as a child on his own for a while, then a young adult, and finally as a husband and parent. The details of the story, more or less a standard save the world from a great evil plot, matter less than the game's overall goal of portraying a complete picture of one of these JRPG heroes the audience has enjoyed playing as over the years. Except rather than jumping into the shoes of an established warrior or a young trainee, we get a Godfather-esque exploration of how an inexperienced child, destined to play an important role in saving the world, comes into adulthood to become the man he was meant to be. We're there for every moment of sorrow, every modicum of growth, and every badass victory. That's Dragon Quest V's highest achievement. Before I go on, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It's free and really helps videos like this reach more RPG fans. I appreciate ya. DQ5's soundtrack, while not among my series favorites so far, appropriately highlights this literal adventure of a lifetime with vibrant classical melodies as you take to the sea and skies, or somber dirges when you're at your most downtrodden, all courtesy of the late Koichi Sugiyama. It's typical Dragon Quest fare, except this time there wasn't quite enough of it. I could've used a few more tracks, as it started to get repetitive in the latter half. That's a typical complaint of mine for Dragon Quest music-wise. I hope this improves as I delve deeper into the series. I do want to stress, however, that quote-unquote typical Dragon Quest fare still means really awesome classically styled music that I listen to regularly even outside of the game. Throw on a DQ compilation next time you're doing yard work or cooking or whatever. It's a perfect time-passing companion. Chunsoft fully stretches their creative legs with their first SNES title, using the console's power to explore new ideas while retaining the series' strong essence. Despite the emphasis on story and a new gameplay twist I'll discuss in a bit, DQ5's changes by no means make for a departure or reinvention. It's not like, say, Final Fantasy IV, whose ATB system forever altered the course of that series by introducing a real-time element to battles. Instead, DQ5 marks an evolution, proclaiming JRPGs are no longer about grinding through monsters to get better equipment to kill the big bad. Now they aspire to be something more, to try out new systems and tell stories more complex than a paragraph, all while not changing the core presentation style. Some even call 5's story one of the best ever in a JRPG, and while I wouldn't go that far, I'm impressed by how the writers at Chunsoft leapt from Dragon Quest III's basic fantasy plot to a sprawling epic spanning generations. And they did it all on the SNES, an especially impressive feat, even though there's not a ton of depth beyond the main plot points. Thankfully, that's where party chat comes in. Like in the mobile version of DQ4, talking to a party member at any time reveals their thoughts on the most recent piece of dialogue or story event. There's a huge amount of this text, dozens of lines for each location, since it updates whenever you talk to a new NPC, and even more astoundingly, all of it's interesting. It's my favorite part of the game, especially when you meet and choose your future wife, who, by the way, becomes a party member. Regardless of who you pick, there's 3 options in the remake and 2 in the original, you'll get a heaping dose of her personality. I went with Deborah, the remake exclusive option, who I heard was hilarious, and she didn't disappoint. A real ball buster, she's a tsundere that's light on the dere with no lack of judgmental opinions on any given person or situation. Highly recommended, purely for the comedy. But the fan favorite choice is surely Bianca, the hero's hometown honey that he's known since childhood and meets sporadically as the game unfolds. Supportive and cheerful, she seems to be the intended canonical option, as you get way more scenes with her than anyone else. Nira, Deborah's sister, is the complete opposite of her kin, a quiet, shy gal who basically just wants to make everyone happy. Wifey material for a hero type, no doubt, but it seemed like her party chat options might be kinda boring in comparison. Sorry Nira, I wanted a brat summer. It's worth noting these lovely ladies also learn slightly different lists of spells, so the hero's nuptials aren't a pure story-based choice. Early decisions like this play a big factor in endgame boss fights, so it's worth planning ahead if you're new to the game. Though you meet each potential wife at different points in the story, the writers manage to bring them together in a logical way, then make your choice the correct plot-relevant one for your playthrough. Indeed, the most fitting English subtitle in the series so far, Hand of the Heavenly Bride, might seem straightforward, but you'll be able to glean a few deeper meanings from it after playing the game. Crucially, getting married means having kids, and both your son and daughter will be available in the late game as party members themselves, representing the third Pancras generation of ass-kicking. Fighting side by side with your own kid after playing through the hero's whole life hit me in a way I haven't quite felt from another RPG. It's the same urge that makes a man want to go conquer a country or something. If you know, you know. As if injecting the story with growth hormones weren't enough, Chunsoft also added an entire freaking monster-catching system to the game, reminiscent of Megami Tensei. If it's strange I haven't mentioned that yet, well, it's treated almost as a hidden mechanic. A rabid saber-toothed cat joins your party early on, but for story reasons soon leaves, and DQ5 doesn't do a great job of explaining that you can catch more, or how to do so. You've got to meet a few conditions to unlock the feature, and while all the required info to do so is there, a guy in an early town explains it, it's overly convoluted and easy to miss. While I suspect the manual explains the basics, I can see someone nowadays emulating the whole game without ever figuring out that you can catch monsters after the Saber Cat. That would be tragic since they're incredibly useful, for Dragon Quest V continues the series' tradition of frequent large difficulty spikes. Even worse for an unprepared player are the long, early, and mid-game stretches where you're stuck with only 1 or 2 party members for hours at a time. Without any monster help during these parts, you're asking to burn yourself out grinding. Yet, while monsters will play a crucial role in battle for all but the most seasoned players, they also feel tacked on, since there's no way to customize or do anything other than battle with them, and aside from Saber, they're optional. Going into the game knowing about the capture mechanic, I was hoping for a bit more meat to the system aside from basic level ups. Largely, once I found a monster I liked, I just stuck with it. While Dragon Quest V doesn't skimp on difficulty, it's still not a hard game in the grand scheme of things, though I'd put it on par with the earlier entries in the series as an adequate challenge for a JRPG. A wider variety of useful items makes fights easier, but bosses hit particularly hard to compensate, with plentiful party wipe attacks common by the endgame. Fortunately, DQ5's got more party customization than ever, letting you choose any combination of your wife, son and daughter, dozens of monsters, even recruitable NPCs Phantasy Star 2 style. Thankfully, there's tough decisions to make since you've got several mages with different spell loadouts to choose from, and even when taking your hero's spells into account, there's no way to get everything you want or account for every possible battle situation. You can swap party members out in most fights anyway, so this isn't that big a deal, but I appreciate the effort on Chunsoft's part in making party management fun. I was happy with my family members and pet Slime Knight, so I didn't add any of the NPCs to my party, but it's cool how Chunsoft snuck that feature in, again without much overt mention, and how they're all characters you've gotten to know during your journey. Another example of how DQ5 strives for, and achieves, cohesion, as opposed to DQ4's more disjointed approach. You might never know these NPCs are recruitable, but it makes sense why they join you if they do. Of course, most party choices only become available as you near the end of your adventure. Most of the time, you'll have a set party as you journey through a section of the hero's life, and Chunsoft gets creative here. Surely inspired by Final Fantasy IV, which came out a year prior, you're never in one place for long, constantly moving from location to location and set piece to set piece, dropping and swapping party members according to the plot's whims. While cutscenes aren't as elaborate as FF4's, they're a solid leap over Dragon Quest IV's clunky action, and if you play the modern remakes of DQ4 and 5 back to back, you can tell 5 was originally a SNES game. There's just more to it, more action, more visual effects, more characters, more everything. And as with most 90s games, that's a good thing. Likewise, the writers aren't afraid to explore dark topics up close, like slavery. There's a whole sequence where the hero gets captured as a child, sent to a work camp, and abused for years. It's not just a cutscene, this is a lengthy chapter of the game that you have to play through and experience for yourself. That's not to revel in the macabre, there's plenty of uplifting sequences as well, like when you gain control of your own mighty ship. I mentioned this in my DQ3 video, but Dragon Quest makes you feel like the hero more than any other JRPG series by avoiding characterizing the hero too much. Instead, it lets you imagine it's you in the game. If you're into that kind of interactive experience instead of a pure story, well, Dragon Quest does it best. Lastly, I hope I haven't oversold Dragon Quest V's story. While it's a charmingly executed tale of wonder, hope, loss, pain, and strength, it's not as though it'll satisfy you like a novel would. This ain't the pinnacle of literature, it's good writing for a SNES-era RPG. If it weren't part of a video game, I wouldn't be interested in this story at all, and I think most honest people would agree. Downloading and reading through game scripts isn't exactly a common hobby as far as I'm aware. RPG stories only work when you play through, or at least watch a game for yourself. The thing is, that's okay. Games are games, they're not books, and I try to appreciate them for all they have to offer. DQ5 is no different. What makes it great is how its gameplay elements tie into each other through the cohesive narrative, everything contributing to the goal of taking the player on a journey through the hero character's life. This story could only be interesting in the context of a game, and in that context it's the perfect recipe for an epic tale of sacrifice, destiny, and family. Unlike my previous DQ videos, it's hard to gauge Dragon Quest V's reputation in the West until the DS release just 15 years ago, which sold and reviewed well, but seems not to have made as much of a splash as 8, 9, or 11 in terms of bringing the series to wider recognition. The original Super Famicom game, however, sold like gangbusters in Japan, becoming the home country's best-selling title of '92. Though it never quite reached the levels of perennial favorite Dragon Quest III. In the West, these days I see 5 at the top of fan rankings about as often as 8 or 11, and more so than 3, but I tend to favor the Japanese sentiment on this one. DQ5 doesn't quite satisfy me against its enormous reputation as well as Dragon Quest III managed to. That game's relative simplicity yet somehow deeper gameplay has a bit more pull over me. DQ5's cohesive storytelling remains untouchable for its era and will surely continue to be the reason many fans hold it in such lofty regard. Thanks for watching. I've been Leon from RPG Haven. Leave a like for that algorithm, subscribe for more videos on RPGs of all kinds, let me know in the comments if you think DQ5 deserves its reputation, and have a blessed day.